Welcome to the second day of the training. Please be aware that the people who need translation into Albanian from English have to choose German to the interpretation button that you have it down and you used it yesterday. The one who need translation from English to Macedonian language, they have to choose French. The one who need to have translation from Serbian to from English to Serbian has to choose Chinese, and the ones who need translation into Romanian language, they have to choose Spanish. Okay? So welcome and have a good day. Maria, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mirella. Thank you for everyone joining us today. Today we will start with a topic which is very interesting, and it's actually the main precondition for doing our job as researchers, as analysts of budgets, and the implications of the policies and budgets on the gender equality in our community, in our countries, in our region. The topic is related to data, and we called it actually this session gender statistics. Gender statistics, let me just share the screen. So what are gender statistics? We are using interchangeably different terms related to data and statistics that measure the gender differences, the gender impact, the changes in gender roles and gender relations. That is data, statistics, and indicators. All of them are actually figures, are measurements of the number of people, but also measurements of the attitudes and their perceptions. So the data that are showing the differences between men and women are usually called gender data, gender statistics, or gender indicators. What are the difference between these three terms? I will talk about during this session. What do they say? Actually, they are usually telling us where we are now in terms of what is the gender status, what is the status of women and men in certain sector, in certain area. And also they can help us project where we want to go, where we want to be, what goal, gender objective we want to achieve. And also they are allowing us to measure that achievement. The different steps taken to get us to the goal. So actually gender data are very important for doing any type of gender work. To show you exactly what I mean, I will start with explaining the first definition about gender statistics. The gender statistic definition is taken from the UN Statistical Development Journal in 2005 called The World's Women, which says that gender statistics are statistics that adequately reflect the differences and inequalities between women and men in all spheres of life. This is very important because it shows us what statistics measure, and that is differences, because we are different, we have different roles, we have different needs, we have different interests, and because of the patriarchal model of our families, because of the gender roles and the gender stereotypes that are prevailing, even though most of the countries in the region have equal legal regimes that allow equality of rights between women and men, still inequalities persist because of these pertinent gender stereotypes. Sometimes they're inspired by traditions, sometimes religion is the one that influences it, but in most cases it's socially acquired expectations and roles on what is feminine and what is masculine. So the data that measure these differences and inequalities we call gender statistics must be, first of all, sex disaggregated. Without sex segregated data, we cannot do any determination of the differences between men and women. We have to know what is the situation of men. For example, how many, what are the educational results of men in high school, as compared to the educational results of women, of girls in high school. Secondly, the characteristic of gender statistics is that they reflect these differences. By showing you the data set of men who are boys who have certain education results in high school as compared to the girls' educational results, we are not showing only the sex difference, but we are also showing the gender difference, because we can detect the reasons, the factors that influence on those educational results. I presume that the curriculum for boys and girls in the same school, in the same class, is the same implemented, but how we treat boys and how we accept their educational performance to be weaker during the teenage years as compared to the girls' performance results with a lot of much better educational results of girls in high school as compared to boys in high school. In order to have data which is sex disaggregated, called gender statistics, we have to know the basic concepts and definitions on gender, which recognizes also the differences between men and women. Finally, this data that we are analyzing has to be gathered, generated through data collection methods, which take into account the socio-cultural factors that may cause the data to be biased. Why am I saying this? Because many researchers, many UN agencies are showing statistics, empirical data sets on differences between women and men without actually taking these socio-cultural factors. In example, if we do only a survey of agricultural women or women in rural areas and men as well, we might not detect the same level of differences, gender differences, that can be detected with using different methods than survey, which is, for example, interviews or focus group discussions. Focus group discussions and interviews are qualitative methods of gathering data, and they show us the different attitudes and perceptions, which are very important because gender differences are not easily detectable with quantitative methods like surveys. And finally, how we implement these qualitative methods determines whether we will have biased data in terms of gender or not. Why is this important? Because we can have a focus group discussion in a rural area with men and women together, and you will see in most cases in all countries in the region that women will tend not to speak openly in front of the other participants who are men. So how we organize also this data gathering is determining whether the data will be biased or not. Because if the perceptions and attitudes of women are not voiced, then we will not have data that will reveal these differences and inequalities between the women and men in any sector. So sociocultural factors are important. Knowing the definitions and the gender concepts are very important in order to say that sex disaggregated data are actually gender statistics. They are gender statistics only if they are based on this basis. So what are the gender indicators? Indicators are measurements that show changes in the gender relations or the gender concepts like gender roles, relationships between women and men, participation of women and men, influence of women and men, and so on. Usually indicators are measurements that are collected over time and show differences between situation A and situation B. They can be presented as a difference between the sexes. We have here one example from Pakistan, where it says that in Pakistan, 75% of men and 54% of women in the age group 15 to 24 are illiterate. This is an indicator of literacy between women and men in this age group in Pakistan, but they can also be presented as gender-specific indicators, measuring the changes that are specific to women and related to a certain gender inequality. For example, we know that women in every country in the world are mostly victims of violence, public or in the public or in the family. This example from Nicaragua shows us how a gender-specific indicator related to the number of reported cases of physically abused women can be used, saying that 50% of women reported that they have been physically abused. So why do we need gender-sensitive indicators? As CSOs, we need gender-sensitive indicators to be set by the government or to be set by us when we measure the results of the gender integration interventions in policies and budgets, to measure and evaluate the challenges that our community is going through, and in order to gather enough information to adjust the programs and the activities that are being programmed by the local governments, by the central government, and to provide recommendations on how these programs can be improved, or to propose totally different initiative, policy and budget initiative, which will improve or enhance the gender equality status in the country or in your region, in your municipality. Why? Because with the data we have determined the status, and we see how the policies and budgets are being implemented and whether they impact positively or negatively on the status of gender equality in the country, in the municipality, in the region. So we need gender-sensitive indicators to emphasize the gaps between what is desired and promised and what was achieved. Therefore, data is one of the most important tools on how to hold government accountable and how to actually produce evidence-based and relevant gender budget watchdog report. So how do we gather data? As I was talking, through quantitative methods and qualitative methods. The quantitative methods are traditionally more preferred and are perceived as more objective and easier to check, but they allow for simpler access to change, and especially from an international perspective can be rather easy to compare them with the data that has been gathered using the same method in different countries. So if well selected and formulated, also quantitative data can show changes in gender equality over time and can link this information to other factors that can be useful for doing a gender budget watchdog report. Where do we get data? This data quantitative data can be obtained from different sources. There are several international databases that can be used, differing from the topic and the sector where you work, from Eurostat to World Bank to IMF to FAO in terms of agriculture. Or if you turn to national statistics, of course, the national statistic offices in all of our countries are gathering data which is disaggregated by sex. Not all of them publish them like that, but they have it in raw format in all state statistical offices that we have around the region. All of the countries where we work have a specific publication which presents the status of women and men in the country. They're called differently in every country, and several countries in the region also have produced a gender equality index following the methodology of the European Institute for Gender Equality. So these are the sources that you can use to actually determine the status of gender equality in each of the countries in specific areas, from education to health, to social protection, to agriculture, to women in politics, to women in governance, and so on. But if you work on a local level, also the state statistical offices are gathering data which is relevant to the regions and the provinces, the regions, depending on how the country is organized, and municipalities. So asking these branch offices of the State Statistical Office for sex disaggregated data per municipality or per region is one way of how to get quantitative data on the differences between women and men. Be careful, because not all this data is based on gender concepts. So some of them can be very useful to illustrate the inequalities between women and men. For example, if you work in economic area, the participation of women and men on the labor market, the participation of the data on the employment data, the activity data, the unemployment data, the data on where women and men work per sectors. The wage data are very much based on the gender concepts and can be useful for illustrating the differences between women and men and the inequalities on the labor market, and can show the gaps, the gender gap on the labor market in each of the countries. One very
Jedan specifičan alat koji većina zemalja koristi
Ecuadoran
vodite za statistika anchetata za
how citizens are using their time.
Modul în care cetățenii își folosesc timpul. Deci studiul cu privire la utilizarea timpului
to measure the differences between women and men in terms of the burden of care and housework that is taken by women. This is the only statistical tool that is implemented on a representative sample in each country that can depict how much free time women have, and can inform us whether they can be active, for example, in participation in local processes, decision making, in politics, in advancing their knowledge, in starting up a business, which takes a lot of time, and so on. So there are many quantitative methods through which data is gathered that can be useful for your watchdog work when you determine the situation between and the differences between women and men in your country. So, but these are not the only ones. As I said, quantitative methods tend to capture a status that is not sensitive to the socio-cultural factors that are influencing on women, and that in a way affect whether women's real situation, needs, interest, and voice is being captured by the quantitative data. That's why when we do gender analysis, we usually apply mixed method approach by using quantitative data on one side and qualitative data on the other. The qualitative data is obtained through interviews, focus group discussions, and it will also capture to public opinion polls if there are open questions for capturing the perceptions and attitudes related to certain questions, issues. So these qualitative methods allow us to interpret the data that we have. Can you?
Hello, Merciha. Please close the mic.
Merciha? But the mic is closed. It's Vesna Stajic.
Yes, Mersiha Yaskic.
No. Mersiha is okay. Vesna was the one with the mic on. It's okay. Thank you very much, Vesna and Mersiha. So, in terms of qualitative methods, I was saying that they can be interpreted. And it allow us to evaluate the data that is gathered from the with use in a the qualitative data is also useful for controlling the quality of the quantitative data to check whether the quantitative data is biased and is taking in consideration the sociocultural factors. But also it allows us to explain the factors why this is the situation. So if we use the previous example where I was talking about the number of women active on the labor market, the number of women employed, the number of women unemployed, we can capture the situation as a fact, as it is in our country, but with the quantitative data, we will not get information that can interpret why this is the situation, why so little number of women are active on the labor market as compared, for example, to the European labor market activity data that we can obtain through the Eurostat database. And this is what we will find out, that, for example, in Macedonia, or in Bosnia, in Kosovo, a lot of women are not active on the labor market. Almost half of the women are not active on the labor market. That means that they don't even seek for work, because they have a different role in their families. They have many children. They are not expected to work. They are not. They play the role of mothers who are taking care of their children, the household, the old people in the family, because of the structure of the family being multi-generational, living in the same estate, and so on. So all this information we will not capture with the quantitative data. We will need qualitative methods in order to understand the reasons behind the status that we have captured with the quantitative data. Another aspect that is measured through qualitative methods and cannot be captured with quantitative is the attitudes and the perceptions, as well as values, what women and men value in a certain policy, for example, or in a certain fact issue that is pertinent in the country. We know that in all countries in the world, we have gender pay gap, for example. In certain sectors, this pay gap is bigger. This is not because women and men who are on the same position, working in the same position, are paid differently. At least not in our region. In many other countries in Europe and in the US, this is the situation as well, which shows a total gender discrimination. But in our countries, the pay gap is a result of the fact that we don't use the same evaluation criteria for the value of the work we do. For example, some jobs with the same simplicity of the tasks that are being performed, the skills and knowledge that needs to be acquired, which are considered to be masculine, meaning that are acceptable to be performed by men, are paid more then the jobs which also require the same simplicity, level of knowledge, skills, but are acceptable and considered as feminine, and are paid much less than the first types of jobs. So this gender pay gap cannot be only captured by the number of people working at that job and the salary that is being given to these people, whether they are men or women. We have to find out why women are paid less and why women accept to be paid less. It is probably, I mean, in most of the cases, but it can be different. That's why we do research and use qualitative methods to capture these differences. But usually it's because you cannot survive, you cannot provide survival for your family if you are considered the main breadwinner and you're a man in the family. So this perception and attitude towards men as main breadwinners are determining also different other trends that are showing inequality. For example, are determining trends of gender gap on the labor market in terms of choosing a profession. We have a lot of women in the care sector working in the as caregivers in kindergartens, in working with elderly, feeble people, and so on, and not so many men. The salaries and the gender pay gap in this sector is obvious. These are labor intensive and are low paid jobs, and we don't have men interested to acquire these skills and get these jobs because of that. If we increase the salary in this sector, we will achieve gender equality as well. These jobs will become attractive for men as well. And I will show you how this has happened in our region for other professions. It's not related that much. It is related to the gender role of women being the main caregiver in families, but not necessarily. I'll give you another example. In ex-Yugoslav countries, I'm not sure about Albania and Romania, but you will tell me in discussion. During the socialist period, a lot of women worked as judges in the justice sector. This, at that time, was a very low-paid job. And it was office job. It had relatively short working hours. So women, this was a typical woman's job because women can be highly educated, can be on a rather not that much powerful position because justice was not served by the judges but by the party, but still it was an important position in the society, and plus women could be rested and can come home to do the second shift at home, taking care of the family and children and everyone else. So the moment the transformation of the system came, the judges' positions became much more important, much more powerful, and in the same time it increased, I mean, their salaries levels started to increase. The moment the salary level started to increase, if we look at the historical numbers, still women are more numerous in the justice sector, but they're changing. The trends are changing because these positions become more attractive for men. So what I'm saying is that we have to know all these gender concepts in order to understand and interpret the reasons why this is happening, and how we can, with different proposals and measures, transform the situation and influence on the enhancement of gender equality. So qualitative methods are equally important. Are equally important, and especially because they are measuring something that quantitative methods cannot measure, and that is the feelings, the perceptions, the attitudes, which are very important in order to explain why some policy or budget is not being implemented or is not providing for results in the same way for women and men. Why some policy is not beneficial for women. And in this way, we can also generate arguments how to improve the policy design and to maybe formulate a gender budget initiative on local level and on central level on how to invest the public money in order for the investment for the public money used to be beneficial for both women and men, and that way to show that we use the public finances in the gender balanced way. The experiences of women and men are different, and whenever I work with local governments, I usually have a tough time explaining them that you cannot design a service or invest in a public good without taking in consideration the experiences of women and men from previous service delivery or for current use of the service or the public good. Because it's very important to invest the money in a public good or a service which will be beneficial for all. After all, only that type of public service or public good will be valued as good, and that brings also trust to the government, to the local government. It brings a second mandate for your mayor and so on. So to illustrate this, I will give you an example from the city of Skopje. City of Skopje, in the previous mandate, for example, has designed a lot of multi-storage parking spots where without actually doing an assessment whether this public investment will be used and specifically whether it will be used by women. So there were different parking buildings erected, and one particular building was closed very soon after opening because no one was using it. This was a parking lot which was situated next to the court office. So there were a lot of women judges and court clerks working in the courts, and they would not use the parking building. Why is that? Because the later survey showed that women are very much afraid. They feel fear to enter in a closed area that is not so well lit, that is empty, and it looks insecure. It shows you feelings of insecurity without having specific policies implemented that will encourage women to use this public investment, like, for example, specific spots for parking spots for women next to the exits, cameras for security cameras, security guards on every floor, very good lighting system, alarms everywhere, and so on. So neither a public awareness campaign was made, and so on. So in terms of market, this investment was not useful, was not cost effective, because they did not do the market research of the experiences, the perceptions and attitudes of the main target group, that can be beneficiaries for that particular parking lot. So I will give you now one exercise, and this exercise is actually 2 case studies, for which I would ask you to be divided into 2 groups. We have enough time to finish this exercise. So the case studies I will send now in this group to everyone, but I will ask you to break out. I will ask actually Mirela to break out the group into 2 groups. We have breakout rooms for this purpose, but I will let me go into full screen if it's possible. No. I don't know how to do it. Stop the share. That's okay.
Don't worry about that, Maria.
Okay.
Because they will go to the breakout rooms now.
Yeah, that's okay.
But what is your
chat? In the chat, I will send you a file, which is the case studies.
Well, you know that the only for separating in rooms needs some minutes. And the people have the break at 10:30 until 11.
Okay. So what would you suggest for this to be done by in homework?
I suggest this because we have only 10 minutes and I need, there are 43 participants, let's say 32 participants that need to be separated in different rooms. Okay. And you said the people who speak Albanian in one room and the others in the other room, but still we have people who speak Romanian. So.
Okay, that's okay. Then I will continue with the presentation and I will send you then 2 homeworks. One would be to choose one of the case studies and to do the tasks, the 3 different tasks related to the case study. And another homework would be to analyze a set of data that I have gathered in order for you to see how you can use the gender statistics into gender analysis and providing gender recommendations. Okay, so then I will go to the again to the presentation. Let me share the screen. So why we as CSOs are needing gender statistics? Because with the gender statistics and the gender data, we can do situation analysis. And what is the situation analysis? It includes analysis of the situation of women and men, And of course, not just women and men, but also the different subgroups that are in the area. For example, we can talk about ethnic women. We can talk about women in rural areas, which are more marginalized than women in urban areas. We can talk about women with disabilities. We can talk about women that are victims of violence. So we can talk about other subgroups in any given area. Like, for example, if we work in education, we would be interested about the participation of ethnic minority women in the education or specific groups of women that are usually not attending the education. Or why we could use the gender statistics, because with the data we can identify actually the possible issues that have gender dimension. In any area, if you look at the data, the statistics, you will determine that there are different gaps between women and men, and some gaps are determined from the gender relations, the gender roles and the gender stereotypes that are pertaining. So this is what we are interested in when we are doing gender analysis, and that's why it's important when you do your budget watchdog work to start with gender statistics, to start with data, to determine, first of all, what are the differences between women and men, and possibly to gather data on the needs of women and men. Sometimes this data is available, gathered through different statistical operations, but usually it is not available, and it is the role of civil society to interview, to survey, and to determine the different needs of women and men in the area, and based on that to analyze the gap between the needs and the policies that are set and the budgets that are allocated to respond to those needs, to assess whether the needs are responded, are reflected into the policy measures and the budget that is being allocated. So the needs we divide into two groups, which are practical gender needs and strategic gender needs. The practical gender needs are related to the basic needs of survival, which are food, shelter, clothing, water, and so on. They are related to the material conditions of life, usually are short-term, depending on whether there is dedication and commitment of the government to provide opportunities for everyone to earn their income, provide food and shelter, clothing and water for their families, whether the government has provided for infrastructure of safe drinking water and sewage for the communities that live in certain municipalities and so on. So usually these practical needs are directed towards improvement of the living condition and are not affecting the social status of women. An example for that is that, for example, in Saudi Arabia, we have very good infrastructure. It's a very wealthy state where people have all these practical needs met, but still the women do not have the same position, the same rights, and are facing oppression, although these practical needs are being met. The practical gender needs are something that usually the governments are putting emphasis to with their policies and their budgets, but they are not enough in order to achieve gender equality, as this case of Saudi Arabia is showing. So that's why we need to turn and determine the strategic gender needs. These needs are very difficult to define, and usually women have problems to identify them, but are related to the aspects of power, control, and decision. Whether women are in power, whether women have control over assets, money, and so on, and whether they have access to the decisions, are contributing, are participating into the decision-making process. So these are issues all related to the assessment of what is the position of women as compared to the position of men in a society, whether women are subordinated to men. In one agricultural household, whether women have the power to decide what will they produce in the next season. Whether women can control the machines that are owned by the household, or can control the income to which they contribute by contributing to production of the household. These issues, the strategic gender needs, are actually inevitable to assess if we work on gender inequality issues, especially issues related to domestic violence, labor segregation, gender pay gap, and so on. So it is very difficult to identify the strategic gender needs, but in our watchdog work, we have to determine these needs in order to see whether the policy and the budget that is being developed are addressing also not just the practical needs of women and men, but the strategic needs, because this is what allows a woman to empower herself, to break out from the stereotype and achieve a gender equality or equal opportunity that is being prescribed with the law. If a woman can break out of the expected profession of being a teacher or a caregiver or a nurse, and show ambition for being a coder or a designer that would allow bigger pay for her and break the labor segregation that is pertinent, we are allowing for the realization of the equal regime that is prescribed in legal regime that is prescribed in each of our countries. So these strategic gender needs refer to the socioeconomic and the political position of women in our society compared to men, and in order to be addressed, we need a certain skill set of women to be gained in order to achieve equality. We need legal conditions, of course, if there is gender discrimination ongoing, based on law as well. And we need social values that need to be altered in order to accept women as equally achieving the opportunities that as men. So what are the different factors that influence on the practical and strategic needs of women and men? These are marginalization, exclusion of the processes in decision making, especially discrimination, which is a different treatment based on different factors. It could be the belonging of being of a certain sex. Objectivization, which is actually assignment of less than human status when treating women, especially used in marketing. And infantilism, when you're categorizing women together with children, usually happening in war and conflicts, and but also in many countries, infantilism is related to the political status of women, like in Saudi Arabia. Dispossession, where through patriarchal systems of property, patriarchal systems, women are dispossessed from property and inheritance. Violence, where physical, mental, and emotional abuse is culturally accepted, it's socialized, and is tolerated by the rest of the community. And can even influence on the harmful practices such as female genital mutilation, and finally subordination. So I will leave you with this slide and I'll finish, and that is how we address these different needs, practical and strategic. The practical needs tend to involve women as beneficiaries and include women in the decision-making process, so that they can determine their needs of water supply, lighting, I don't know, accessibility of different services on local and national level, which improve the condition of how women live, and maybe even can alter the traditional role of women being mostly at home as a housewife and taking care of the children. If we provide, for example, childcare in certain municipalities, we are meeting that practical need, and we are allowing for a woman to seek for a job, but this is not entirely addressing her strategic need to be economically independent, because she will need to have a set of skills of employability and being attractive on the labor market, like education and other factors that are influencing. So the strategic needs involve women as agents, as someone that can change and transform the roles women and men have in society, and can in that way improve the status of power, decision, and control women have over assets, decision making, and public use of money in the society. So this is where I stop. Thank you. I will give you two homeworks, if you allow me. The homework one is the case studies. I'll show you now the case study. I'll show you now. This is the homework, and this is the you see you don't
have
see
to go down
yeah,
one slide.
I'll show it. So these are the case studies. So I have given you very short case study, which is made up. It's not a real case study. And there are two situations, two case studies. You can choose one of them. And you have to think about and write down the policy goals for the situation of the first or the second case studies, and what indicators could be developed that are sex disaggregated in order to monitor the policy goals that you set in the situation that is given to you, which is made up, it's not realistic. The second homework is actually there are three cases there. There are three groups. You can choose one of the groups. The first is about the city of Skopje, the second is about the city of Ohrid, and I think the third is also about the city of Ohrid. In the first, we have participation of women in decision-making in the city of Skopje in the different departments, and you will be asked to analyze the situation and propose a measure, activity, or a policy to be implemented to address that situation. Of course, to do that, first you have to determine the gap between women.
Indicatori de monitorizare pentru
of that activity and to determine the sources of information, the data you will gather in order to monitor the implementation of that activity measure that you would propose to the city of Skopje. The second group has a case statistics related to Ohrid, and these are all related to the working employment statistics. So you have to resolve the situation of gender differences and gaps in the city of Ohrid. And the last, the task here is the same as in the first case. You set, you have to, based on the analysis of the gap, set activities, a measure or a policy that you will recommend. You have to define indicators and sources of information on how to measure the implementation of the activity that you will propose. The third group is having data on the statistics, we call them, how do we call them? Vitality statistics. So they are related to the births, how many births and deaths, and we have in the city of Ohrid what are the reasons for this and what are the migrations or the flow of population in Ohrid. So you have to here also determine the gaps and to propose to the city of Ohrid activity, a measure to improve the gap between women and men, and to measure this activity through indicators, also determine the sources of information where you will get in order to monitor the implementation of the activities. In this way, we are also analyzing data from a gender perspective, but also we are defining indicators and are determining the sources of data. As CSOs, we have to be skillful in doing that. The task is to send me the homework by Monday and by email. I will send you these two documents by email. I'll expect your returned homework email on Monday, and I will provide feedback to you if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you all for listening. Sorry you didn't have, there are some questions
There are
you
questions,
didn't have, but let's do it in the beginning of the first session. Probably people need to rest because in 20 minutes Vishnia will start.
Yes, okay.
So it's only Makedonka who is asking you to know what to do. What do you understand under the concept of indicator?
Indicator is a measurement, actually, that by indicator I understand a way how to measure between a situation A to situation B. For example, in the homework that I have given you, the status of employment in Ohrid is already set with the gender statistics. You will have to have a measure activity to improve that status and to measure through an indicator on how that status will be changed through the measure. For example, we have 35% of active women on the labor market. We want to increase that in 5 years for 5%. The measure we are going to propose to the city of Ohrid is a scheme that will allow for women to get requalification or training, or another scheme for starting up a business, and we will have measures like speeches, motivational speeches, and things like that. So the indicator would be the 5% increase of the activity rate of the women on the labor market. The measurement was changed between the situation A, which is 35%, to situation B, 40%.
Thank you, Maria. There are no other
questions.
Questions.
The other issues are related to translation.
Okay, everybody.